Alright fellas, now a phrase that constantly seems to be thrown around is the face of boxing. It seems like all the top boxers and their promoters nowadays claim that they're the face of the sport. Unlike pound for pound, which at least has some sort of vague ranking, being the face of boxing doesn't mean that you're the best in the sport. Rather, you're the fighter that everyone wants to watch. With several fighters claiming they are the face of the sport currently, I want to talk about who's been the face of boxing, and then working through to find the answer of who's the face of today. So, let's get right into it. Now, the face of boxing isn't always who's actually the best in the ring, yet I would say it comes down more so to three categories: who's the most recognizable, who's the most influential, and who's the most marketable. To put it even more simply, when you go ask your nan who doesn't know a thing about boxing what current boxer they know, usually their answer you could point to as the true face of boxing. Say during the 60s and the 70s, although there were many legendary boxers, the one who you would mention of course is the 3-time world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali. Him being the face of boxing wasn't just down to him having the biggest of fights, but also it was down to him being a cultural and political figure. With his charisma, bravado, and outspoken views, it made him the face of the sport at the time. While moving forward to the 80s, once again many great boxers, yet the one who took the mantle at the time was of course Mike Tyson. His meteoric rise and knockout power made him a must-watch attraction for even the most casual of fans, with people who weren't even remotely interested in boxing still wanting to tune in to see him box. Alongside this, his involvement in pop culture as well as his personal controversies have kept him in the public eye, solidifying his status as the face of the sport at the time. Moving forwards to the 2000s, there are many boxers that could have been the face of the sport at the time, yet I think probably Floyd Mayweather takes the mantle of this generation. I would say he changed what it meant to be the face of boxing. Rather than a big outspoken heavyweight, he was a lighter-weight boxer known for his defensive mastery and of course being undefeated. He was a one-man marketing machine. His fights became absolute blockbuster events with some of the biggest paydays ever seen. So moving into a time where boxing seems to be on a popularity decline, to pinpoint who is truly the face of the sport becomes a bit harder. I think really for the first time in boxing history, in this era, a lot of us still consider the past generation as some of the biggest names. Yet this generation has its own stars who should be able to lay claim on this title. Here's my controversial take though. I don't think in this generation we have a boxer who is equivalent to any of who I just mentioned. They might be better in boxing skill, but as a worldwide cultural phenomenon, I don't think we truly have one. But before you go right into the comments to disagree, just let me elaborate on my point because there's way more to that. The phrase the face of boxing more so points to who's the most popular boxer in America, or if you're stretching it to the West. Although you have fighters like Inoue who basically reignited a whole country to get behind the sport, he's not in the running because unfortunately, in common opinion, if they ain't big in America, they ain't actually that big worldwide. And do I agree with this American-centric idea? Well, kinda. I think it is shifting, but to a point at the moment it is somewhat correct. But to find out who's the face of this generation, where would you start? You would probably first look towards the heavyweight division. Tyson Fury probably could have laid somewhat claim to this title if he didn't bottle it against Ngannou and won against Usyk. His loud mouth, previous big fights in America, and overall popularity easily could have made him the face of boxing. Yet, he isn't. Neither is Usyk. Although both faces of boxing, neither of them I think truly meet the specifications of being the face of the sport as a whole. Of course, you then probably move on to the bloke who's claimed it the most, Gervonta Tank Davis. Is he up there? Yeah, probably. Is he in the pound for pound top 10? It's a bit debatable. But he's one of those blokes that you're going to watch every one of his fights, no matter who he's fighting, which I think is a pretty crucial element. He's a bloke that does incredibly well at the gate without really needing any sort of help. He's also one who's pretty culturally relevant, in America at least. From his style to his antics, he's managed to stay in the spotlight. Yet, is he the face? Close, but no. Ryan Garcia has also put his hat in the ring by calling himself the face of boxing. Yet, although culturally relevant in spurts, I don't think he's admired enough or a big enough personal brand to really earn that title. Are you going to watch a Ryan Garcia versus a no-name? Probably less so than you're going to watch Tank versus a no-name. Yet, who's the natural person we all turn to in these sorts of numbers debates nowadays? Well, of course Canelo. He's probably the closest you would get to the face of boxing. The wide-reaching Canelo has been doing this for years, in his Mayweather-esque style of versing world champion after world champion. Truthfully, basically all on his terms, yet every single one of these fights are big events. If you talk about the biggest fights which could be made in boxing, I reckon basically for the past decade, in those top 3 fights at any point of time, they would always include Canelo. and his commercial strength is being proved once again. In a couple weeks, we'll see him take up probably one of his least anticipated bouts ever, against Edgar Berlanga. Truly a fight that no one really wants to see. Going up against UFC 306 at the Sphere, which has been hyped up as one of the biggest UFC events ever, with the UFC even having the backing of the Saudis for this event. Yet as I'm recording, Canelo seems to be selling tickets, and the UFC Sphere, well, they seem to be discounting tickets. The Saudis wanted to push their weight with the UFC Sphere card, showing that Canelo isn't one of the faces of combat sports. Yet in competition with one of the biggest economic juggernauts, he's still showing his commercial value even later into his career against competitors which nobody wants to see. Gun to my head, choose who the current face of boxing is? Well, I would say Canelo. In my actual opinion, I don't think we have a true face of boxing. We don't have an absolutely iconic universal face of the sport. Rather, I think we have a variety of faces like Canelo, Tank, Fury, Usyk, who all do major numbers. To kind of reaffirm it, I don't think we have someone that iconic which we will look back in a few decades and be like, yeah, that's the dude. That's the Tyson of that generation. I don't think that person really exists. As I said, you pushed me for an answer and I'd probably say Canelo. That's not saying we don't have comparable or better boxers in skills to previous generations. You look at Tyson, he wasn't the best of his generation or even his weight class. But I don't think we have a face that truly brings in the ultra casual fan to buy the pay-per-views, yet rather a series of faces which keep the regular fans entertained. When we talk about this generation, unlike previous generations, I think if you're asked to name the most iconic out of the bunch, you'll probably struggle. But now let me know who your picks are for who you think is the face or faces of boxing currently. Let me know, do you think I'm wrong or do you think I'm right? I'd love to hear everything down below. Appreciate you fellas watching, and if you did enjoy, please consider liking and subscribing. But thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.